Me no speak no Spanish. I accidentally recorded this entire video looking at the viewfinder and not my camera lens. Please forgive me, I was not looking at someone else. Before I start this video, I need everyone to first subscribe, right? Hit that notification button for any time that I post a new video. Don't forget to like and comment. Thank you. The title of this video is If I Had $1 for Every Time ... Now let's start where I got this idea for this video. So a few weeks ago, I was coming back to New York, where I live, from Atlanta, going through security. And so I'm there rushing, and the TSA guy was really nice, stopped me and said, "Hey, where are you from?" And I said, "New York." And then he says, "Well, no, what are you?" And so I paused and I smiled and I said, "I want you to guess." And he took a long pause and he says, "Trinidad?" And I said, "No, I'm Jamaican." And he looks at me and he pauses and he gives me like a little, "Oh, okay, I wouldn't have guessed that" stare, which is very typical. This is a question that I have gotten so many times over my life. Like, I grew up in New York, and New York, if you've ever been here and if you've not ever been here, it is a melting pot. It's a hodgepodge of people of different ethnicities, races, nationalities, ethnic groups, just people from all over the world. There is literally no place in America like New York. We are a world within America. Growing up, I lived amongst mostly people of my own heritage, Jamaicans. And then there were times where I've lived in areas with my mom that were, had Hispanics, like Dominicans and Puerto Ricans, and just various groups. My family was never the type to tell us, any of us, like, "Oh, we are this and we are that." And we were just Black people. We are Black people. I identify as a Black woman of Jamaican heritage and from Jamaica. So it was never like what's in our background. At least that's not what I remember. It's not until mother had a quote unquote friend. She was a fake friend, but that's a whole nother story. Said to my mom, "Oh, your children are coolie." And I was very young, and I never really heard that term before. And I remember going to my dad. And as a child, when someone is just calling you a name that you've never heard before, you just think that you're being teased or you're being made fun of. So I remember going to my dad and telling my dad, "My mother has a friend and she keeps on calling us coolie." And my dad his face turned stone cold. And he said, "If she calls you that again, tell her to shut up," or something to that effect. And later on, I found out why he was like so very upset, because growing up as a little boy in Jamaica as well, he was called Coolie Babu. So if anyone is unfamiliar with the term coolie, after slavery was abolished in the Caribbean, the British brought in indentured servants from southern India, and they were called coolies. So in Jamaica, the term Coolie Babu was a derogatory term, and they called my dad that because he was of caramel complexion but had curly hair and like different textured hair from the average Jamaican. Jamaica is a melting pot. Our country's motto is "out of many, one people." But still in various pockets of the island, it's still predominantly people of African descent and of dark complexion. If you live in an area where it's not diverse and you or your family looked a different way, you were termed something. Sometimes people got offended and sometimes people just accepted it. So, I mean, it's very common for like an Indian Jamaican to be called Indian. It's very common for an Asian Jamaican to be called Mr. Chin or Miss Chin, even though they're of maybe Japanese descent. Whatever your phenotype, that's what you were. So that was like my first experience in being categorized as other. Growing up over the years, I've gotten a lot of "What are you?" And I just say I'm Black, and they say no. Well, what are you? What's in your background? So that just made me start to ask questions, because I'm just like, well, I feel like I have to give an answer. I'm getting this question so often that I'm feeling like, well, let me start digging and let me find out, what am I? First of all, no black person is 100% anything. The Ancestry DNA test came out, and I remember just wanting to do it because I'm just like, I gotta know. So I finally took the test, I think, oh my gosh, probably 8 years ago. And it gave me, obviously my DNA is predominantly African. Duh. The largest percent was Ghana, and then it was Nigeria, then it was Bantu, Cameroon, and then obviously the other came in. Since then, the whole DNA makeup has switched, which is very strange to me. Now it's showing that my largest percentile is Nigerian and not Ghanaian, which is a little bit confusing because when I started to ask questions before the test, I remember my grandmother saying that her grandmother, my grandmother's grandmother, was a slave, brought first to England as a child and then to Jamaica. When I saw Ghana being the largest percentile, I was like, Grandma was right. I remember also things like my grandfather is saying, using terms like, oh, he's a bastard. And I was like, well, what does that mean? He explained that he was a bastard because he was not fully black. This is my father's father. And I'll show you a picture of him here as a young man. He obviously is of Creole mix. When he was a little boy, his mother died. And one of his eldest sisters got separated and brought to Kingston by some family members because they said that she was the lightest of them all, and they were all very light, way lighter than myself. But I guess maybe she could pass. That's a whole nother topic. And so she was raised in Kingston with other family, but then she ended up becoming a nun in a convent and missing her family in the country. Very sad. So that's one story that I heard based off of phenotype and complexion and race and so forth. But getting back to my own experience here, a few months ago, I was in the laundromat and the owner had asked me, are you Jamaican on both sides? And I'm like, yeah. For other people, it's really strange to be Jamaican and to be of a lighter complexion or to look differently. And I get it because literally the average Jamaican is of a darker hue and different types of phenotype. So I get the puzzleness, but it's just almost like there's no place in the world where everyone looks the same. At least I don't think so. Me being a very proud Jamaican heritage and as all my family, it's almost like, but why do you find it so odd? Like, why do we have to be something else? This one guy, I remember one time, he's like, you half white? I said, no. You have Spanish? I said, no. So what are you? And I'm like, black. Both my parents are black people. No, you have to have something else in your background. And I'm like, don't we all? It's very funny, but it's also very humoring at the same time to get these questions. I never get offended. I remember working in retail and literally, I felt like every Spanish in general just would look at me and just, I can talk to her, I can get help from her. From the customers that spoke Spanish. And if there was no other coworker around that could speak Spanish, they just eyed me and was like, that's my girl, she can help me. And they just start talking to me in Spanish and I'm like, Juan? I would have to go in another department and ask my coworker, Juan, help me. And then there was a time that I actually started to become very, very good in Spanish because I was just being spoken to in Spanish so often, like every single day. Like even people from Brazil, like they would shout out to me, Sage. And I'm like, what is Sage? And then they would look at me, it's like, why do you not understand me? Some that would come up to me and say, you look like people from our area. And I'm like, really? Okay. I'm like, well, I've always wanted to visit Brazil, so I'm trying to get some other experiences that were really, really funny as well. This one is not my own experience, but this is my dad's experience. I remember I was a little girl. We were somewhere in the Bronx. Back in those days, my dad had hair. He's bald now. My dad wore his hair just like the Dominicans. There was a certain kind of curly mullet hairstyle, and my dad had it, and so did my uncle. I guess they were inspired. I remember this guy coming up to my dad speaking Spanish, and my dad said, "Me no speak no Spanish." You know, to this day, I think about it and I laugh. Like later on in life, I'm like, Daddy, you'd have to say it like that. But, you know, my dad puts the J in Jamaican. Nobody's more Jamaican than him, to me, at least. I mean, his patois is so deep, you just think that him just reach. If you know Scotland, you know that. His patois not change. His accent never change. Even though he'll like to cuss people about their patois and their accent, but again, that's another story. I want to just end this video before it gets too long and show you a few of my ancestors. I would like to show you some of my other family members, but I haven't gotten permission from anyone. But my family is so very diverse. The closest I can describe my family to is we're Creolized people. And I just thought this would be a cute video to, you know, just express my experience of just being mistaken for other ethnic groups and being just this mixed girl. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.